All right, and with that, I think this is on. We are going to start our panel on modernizing IT infrastructure. My name is Kelly Mack. I'm part of the team at Workbench, and I'm very excited to introduce the panelists today. And in preparation for the introduction, I asked everybody for a fun fact because I don't have hobbies myself, so I thought I'd mooch off of them. To begin, to my direct right, we have Sarah Castellanos from the Wall Street Journal. Prior to becoming an amazing journalist, she was a competitive figure skater. Next to her, we have Bill Murphy, CTO of Blackstone. He most recently ran a 200-mile relay race with some of his Penn friends, and that's an amazing human accomplishment. I wish I could run the same. Next to him, we have Luigi Marconi, Managing Director over at BNY Mellon, focused on cloud and distributed computing. I learned today that he's a fan of prog rock, folks like Mars Volta, so one day we'll go to a concert together. And then next to Luigi, we have Ala Whitston from CIT. She's the CTO over there, and I learned today that she collects art and does so over the many travels that she had, so I'm going to start doing that as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it on over to Sarah.
All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. So I'll start with the first question. What is your biggest challenge with cloud adoption, and how have you overcome that challenge? You can start, Bill.
Sure. All right. I had to get the microphone. So I would say, I guess probably to the really good news for everybody here, the biggest challenge is people with the skills in order to take advantage of all the capabilities. And I think that there's like a misnomer of the lift. I think the lift and shift is a really bad idea. I think a lot of people want to say that they're in the cloud. Most corporate technology teams are saddled with tons of debt, so they want to move over so they can get some sort of mythical win at the end of the year so that their bonus gets paid out and so on. And we're really resisting that and trying to do it right. But in order to do it right, we need great people who know how to take advantage of the capabilities that are out there and also think kind of 3 steps ahead about what we're going to need in the future instead of just like, all right, how do I hit some made-up deadline today? So I'd say it's like building a team that thinks differently than you needed yesterday.
Are you having trouble filling those jobs at all, or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sure it's no surprise to everybody here that hiring in technology is hard right now. If anybody's interested, come find me or LinkedIn or whatever. We are, we're not immune to that. Obviously, we think Blackstone's pretty differentiated, but it's kind of weird. Sometimes you talk to our brethren in the financial part of our company, and they don't have as many of the same problems with recruiting that we do. And I think everybody probably has the same issues, I'm sure.
Yeah. Luigi, what about you?
It tends to be approached in a lot of its circumstances, certainly in the organization I've been in, where the intellectual narrative starts more on the infrastructure side. You've got the business that sees sort of shiny object. You've got sort of app dev that is more concerned, at least in a custodial bank, about operational stability, and infrastructure that's feeling the squeeze. There's a lot of chasing the shiny object of, gee, I'm going to retool, I'm going to build my own CI/CD, I'm going to learn how to deploy clusters. Congratulations, you've made it to the starting line, all right? That's a 2-year journey right there. The gist of it, or the rub, is regardless of what you're doing or how you're doing it, do you have some concept of model-driven deployment? Whether it's a legacy app, whether it's a modern refactored 12-factor app, does it take a human sneaker net and an act of Congress to reconstitute a running application? Or do you have it's sufficiently descripted, self-describing in a machine-readable format that even if it's legacy, you can redeploy it? That's the big thing, because if you've got that, then you've prepared yourself either to be more operationally efficient on-prem, and you've met the first milestone for what it means to really operate in cloud.
Ala, what's been your biggest challenge?
I would agree with Bill, it's the people, but I think that one of the most important thing is we can continue hiring from externally and try to actually steal people from each other, and we usually do that quite well, especially on Wall Street here. I think the biggest challenge is how do you wrap your head around and get your own people actually change? How do you bring that culture into organization that it's not just a word? Inclusiveness in a talent acquisition is not just a word, you're building that talent inside out. I mean, if you look at it, there's so many curriculums and training materials and every company wants to do it. I think the challenge is for the organization to commit to it, to really, really commit to it and actually drive it through.
Yeah, that's actually something that I've been hearing a lot from enterprise technology executives, is the culture change is really a big deal. Bill, have you faced any of those challenges with culture change, and if so, how have you overcome them?
Yeah, I think that it sort of speaks to the challenge of a big company as it relates to, and what leads to short-term versus long-term thinking. And they hear cloud, they hear Amazon's going to run it for 1 penny a terabyte or whatever the hell it is today, really cheap, and can't we have that by next quarter? And in order to get there, it's a journey, and you need to convince them to overinvest for a period of time. So that, no one wants to hear that, right? Everybody wants immediate efficiency gains. And then the technologists, I think, need to be kind of strong enough to fight back against tremendous pressure from business folks, and I hate that tech business differentiation, but they have to really fight back against pressure of just saying, can't you do it faster? Can't you do it? And we always want to say yes, because that's what we are, right? We're like solution finders, so everyone's like, yeah, we could do it. And then ultimately, in order to meet a deadline, they have to cut corners and then build something that isn't going to get them where they need to go over the long run. So I think that, like, long-term versus short-term culture dislocation is the biggest problem across all of our companies. And we buy, so Blackstone, we have $550 billion. We buy companies, real estate, all kinds of other assets for, on behalf of our investors. And most of them require a lot of fixing. Buy it, fix it, sell it is is kind of our motto. And during that fixing process is taking a lot of old technology and transferring it to the future. So we get kind of a lot of reps, and we see the same kind of cultural long-term, short-term dislocation in almost every company.
Luigi, is a culture change an issue at BNY as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I look at this particular space, and it's a business process re-engineering effort first and foremost. Like, if you don't understand, if you don't have a business capability model, if you aren't looking at what your business does as a series of transactional flows front to back, how the pieces are wired together, you're just going to create a whole bunch of localized optima and drive a lot of systemic degeneracy.
Ella, how do you know when to build versus buy when it comes to IT?
You wanted to buy first, if you can. You build it only when it's absolutely going to bring you differentiative capabilities. In current day and age of the infrastructure as a service, software as a service, subscription as a service across everything, you can really get to the market really, really fast if you have the right underlying architecture. So if there is opportunity to buy, certainly that will be a choice. But we build when it makes sense to us, when it's something that we are in an absolutely niche business and niche market. And every single time that actually pays. Just recently, good example, and I know we're going to talk about legacy potentially. We looked at the buying. So we brought vendors for RFP, startups, some of you guys, as well as the tried and true companies in that particular market. After the full-scale RFP, we realized not going to happen. So what we're going to do now, we're going to join venture with one of the big companies and co-develop together. So this is one of the places where we said, if we can buy, we're going to go and do it. But since we can't, and this is a very specialized market for us, we're just going to co-develop. And co-development means they're going to invest, we're going to invest, and we are going to promote that going forward. So I think that's thinking in the current day and age is accurate.
Can you say what the big company is that you're...
I'm sorry?
Can you say what the big company is that you're combining with?
I can't tell you what company is, but the business is commercial services. It's very, very specialized business.
Bill, what about you?
One thing on buying, I do think, advice to the startups in the room is like helping the big companies buy more effectively and integrate more effectively your solution into a much broader stack is something that I just don't see enough of. I think everyone gets enamored with their version of whatever solution, whether it be any of the ones we saw earlier and so on. And let's say either of those we purchase, we're not only going to use that Ripple match to do our hiring. We're going to use that in addition to a whole bunch of other things at Blackstone. So it's not about whether we see value in that, whether it can work as part of a broader ecosystem. And it's the same thing with Tilt. It's not the only developer tool we're going to use. It's going to all have to work together. So if the small companies would spend more time figuring out how to integrate and how to sell and how to document and how to make it easier to consume, it's completely overwhelming for those of us who are looking across thousands of products. And it might seem very simple to you if you're in your 1, 2, 5 things that you care about every day. So just try to put yourself in that other perspective when you're thinking about how to face off to the customer, because we all want to buy things, but a lot of times we buy things wrong because it's such a difficult process that we make bad decisions during that determination phase.
Luigi, can you name an example of a time when you really did choose to build versus buy?
Well, you just threw me a softball. In prior life, in another career, I was primarily in the HFT space, so there's no choice.
What about buy versus build?
In current life, I see it as sort of a rolling wave. 3 years ago, I built my own container service because I didn't really have a choice. Play the movie forward, is that a choice I'd make again today? No, but it helped create an uplift in the mindset of what it means to be able to drive and not crash that car.
Ella, is there something that you're seeing where, it's a gap in the market that you really need to be filled, where you would love to work with a startup? Is there any place that you can kind of identify off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, it's probably going to be in a core banking. It's a core banking. I mean, we continue going back to the same core banking platforms. And if the right opportunity presents itself, it's such a monolithic environment that we're all working with. To partner with the right company who can help out to make that change, I think it's going to be game changer for a lot of us in financial industry.
Bill, what about you?
For us, it's all about velocity of how we can get to new innovations faster. So anything that can kind of put all the pieces together. I've been amazed as I've personally learned about the cloud stuff, the amount of products that you need to understand in order to just basically get something efficiently from writing one line of code into production is mind-boggling. I remember, when I started coding, it was like, check it out from source safe, press F5, and then copy it to a server and go. And it was nice and easy. And now everything is so much more complicated, obviously much more powerful as well. But the amount of different products that you have to do, so anything that can kind of shrink down that complexity, create development velocity, is interesting. And I think everybody will love it, because we don't want to spend time on DevOps stuff, and we don't want to spend time on worrying about our developers. We want to spend time on business value creating applications. And the number of meetings where I'm in and we're just talking about stuff that's going to serve only my team, it's frustrating at times, because I want to talk about our investors, and I want to talk about the insights we can get from data and all those good things that come from getting all of this DevOps stuff behind us and focusing on business value. So a little bit more about condensing that would be great.
Luigi, what's on your wish list?
This is the unsexiest thing to say, but go learn about how to manage identity and what it means in a corporate setting, and really go take a moment and learn what it means to have evidentiary quality change control. Because SOX.com can just promote it to prod and not worry about what happened before. When you're the world's largest custodial bank and have a $33 trillion balance sheet, you have to evidence every single thing you do on a consistent basis, because we taste regulator Brill cream on a daily basis. So those are really big control surfaces. I don't think it's particular to just my instance or industry, but it's certainly in the financial services side, the level of introspection and scrutiny from the regulatory regimes as to how do you run your shop, how do you make changes, how do you know you made the right changes, how do you know the right artifact is actually running in prod, is really becoming important.
So just going back to legacy infrastructure, what are you guys doing with your legacy infrastructure? Ella, do you want to start?
Sure. For the legacy infrastructure, first of all, our goal is not to get to exit from the data center. When we think about cloud, it's really opportunistic view of the value realization of the cloud rather than we have an infrastructure that we need to get off. I mean, we're all thinking about hybrid, and that's one of the reasons that we are talking about, our legacy infrastructure. Legacy infrastructure, my point of view is very, very simple. It's not about the infrastructure. It's really irrelevant what you're running it on. It's about your application. Think about application, legacy application, and start from there. But better off, start from the business. Is there a business hindered because you're running on legacy application that potentially runs on a legacy infrastructure? And work backwards from top down rather than the other way around. Because some legacy applications are just fine. Not legacy infrastructure, but legacy applications. So my approach always is going to be solve business problem and drive it down.
Bill, is that your same approach?
Yeah, I'd say we have the benefit of, I've joined Blackstone about 8 years ago, and we've rewritten almost everything, from that time forward. So being a late adopter, the alternative asset industry is not one that is first to the party in terms of use of technology. So we had a little bit less legacy than these guys, which is I'm really happy about now. So we've gotten the benefit of not having to say we're going to leave stuff and we're going to deal with it as is, and we're just trying to take a very measured approach to convert it over in a way that adds value instead of just dumping it onto the cloud and expecting it to be better kind of magically. So we think it'll be methodical, but the goal is to get out of to not have to be hybrid for too long, because we think that's where the real gains can be in velocity, is when we can adopt a single approach that's easier to manage. So hopefully the dream will come true.
Luigi, are you also hybrid at BNY? What are you doing with your legacy?
It's indeed hybrid, much like my partner here on the right. Sorry, I'm Italian, so I gesticulate wildly. We have things that are 30 or 40 years old and that we can't change because we don't want to. It makes absolutely no sense to. It's incredible. Like when you run a global financial systemic utility, operational stability in some areas is incredibly critical. And like if it's not, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and you can maintain it, it works. That all said, I look at it in a different way. Operating sanely, safely, and with velocity in cloud is a lifestyle. And that lifestyle incorporates elements of being able, like I said, being able to manage change, being able to manage identity, being able to know what artifacts you're running, and being able to do so in a way that is entirely at will reproducible. So the way I've driven it is to take those mindsets and practices, absolutely use them in its native habitat, and drive that into my ecosystem. So great, I've got 3,000 apps, 2,500 of which are deep legacy cruft and would have to be refactored from first principles. But on the distributed side, we repave it we can repave that ecosystem on basically on a quarterly basis. We're think about that. It's taking the model of continuous deployment and repavement, that's a cloud native construct, and pushing it back into the legacy space. Because that is just one big lever driving down operational complexity and tech debt. It makes you know what you're operating. Otherwise, you'll break it while you're doing so. Does that make sense?
You're all in a very highly regulated industry. How can you work with startups? How does that impact your work with startups? And what piece of advice would you give to a startup working with you, Bill?
I'd say, care about security, care about the regulatory space, care about all that stuff in a way that shows that you're mature and that you understand that the pressures that others would be under. It's disqualifying when people come in with simplistic answers to, very complicated situations or are very dismissive of that. It's frustrating. I would say the other piece is that most of us want to work with innovative companies and want to buy something that's going to be better tomorrow than it is today. So I don't think that don't disqualify yourselves from having conversations with folks that are regulated because you think that you won't be able to get there. If you're open and you're energetic and you prove that tomorrow's value is going to be way better than anything else on the market is going to be a year from now, then a lot of us will buy into that. And some of us won't, and some people are more risk averse or whatever, and move on from those folks. But I think that there's much more of an appetite than people probably give it credit for to take a little bit of chance there, as long as you understand what some of the risks are and help us close them.
Luigi, best piece of advice?
This is something, I've been on the vendor side, I've been on the startup side, so I've done the full cycle there. It's a campaign. This isn't Tinder, this isn't sweet speed dating. Like, selling into the enterprise is easily a 12 to 18 month sustained campaign. So if you're thinking about it and looking at it as a transaction, it's putting you at it's just a purely transactional relationship. It puts you at a significant disadvantage. You have to build relationships. You have to understand the levers of power there and expect that it's a long sales cycle.
Be easy to do business with. Don't be, we won't give trials, we're not interested in negotiate. Like, those are words you please forget from your lexicon.
Ella?
I think the most importantly is be prepared, know your industry, know where you're getting yourself into, and pick the right partner. Don't overstretch yourself. What we find with those startups, they come in and they engaged with 10, 15 different companies trying to actually do the POCs and try to sell the product, co-develop. And usually where you find yourselves in a situation that we, banks or regulated company, get ourselves very much frustrated with the situations of this nature. Find the right partner who has patience, who understands the value proposition, and is going to be there for the long run with you. Don't try just to sprint into the sale, just think about the long run with the partner. Because once that is successful, from then on it's a really nice, beautiful road. But that's very, very important, don't overstretch.
How many startups are each of your respective companies working with on average, can you say?
A lot. I don't
Like
know,
dozens?
Tens, yeah, probably tens. And we only work with maybe 200 vendors, so it's like, a meaningful percentage.
In the past year, just in my space, I've probably talked to over 100.
We are much smaller, so probably 10 to 20, but in the previous lives, probably, yes, along the same lines, yes.
All right, I think we're going to take some questions. Okay, in the back, Blue.
Do each of you have someone or a group of people on your staff that you actively use to find new startups, new ideas, or do you do it yourselves?
Do each of you have somebody actively on your staff to find startups, or do you do it yourselves?
I'd say it's on my entire leadership team and really the whole team to bring great ideas. So there isn't one person, and I actually think it's better for everybody to be canvassing, because it's just, more eyes are better, plus people have different areas of expertise. I want my chief architect to be looking at my cloud and DevOps, my CISO to be looking at security, and my my engagement folks looking at our CRM or project management software. So it really it depends on, but it's an expectation of everyone.
Any more questions? Great.
I found it interesting that security wasn't mentioned when you were talking about cloud adoption. I'm curious if that's just a sign of the times and if that's being driven by the major public cloud providers themselves or the third-party vendors that are making more or less concerned about security.
Question was, why wasn't security mentioned in the shift to the cloud and cloud adoption?
You can tell I just want to jump out of my chair here. It's because I didn't want to identify myself as a hostile, because I'm not, okay? And I didn't want to make eyes glaze over, but it is the largest obstacle to, not having a mindset of we think of security as in code vulnerabilities, but that's why I just tried to hint it in there homeopathically. How do you do change management? How do you manage identity? How do I know that what went into this coming out the other end is what I should be running? It is the largest impediment. I gave you one other one, and that's just diving way down into the weeds, but damn well better be able to map your endpoints. Because I'm going to just go bolt a whole bunch of cloud onto my enterprise and anything can talk to anything. And I've just ballooned my attack surface to the point where the CISO throws up on your shoes while you're actually talking to him. So being very mindful of, nothing runs as root. What are my endpoints? What are my expectations? How do I keep that really lean? How do I think about perhaps having to deal with protocol breaks on the way in and out of the enterprise? Come prepared with at least a story or some awareness that those are requirements.
How about data lineage and the security, right? Data privacy, data
yeah.
lineage. So, like you said, let's not get us started on it.
Yeah, and the last thing is just cloud is it was just a oversight in terms of talking. We only have a certain amount of time, but going to cloud is not an excuse to have less governance. And I think a lot of people view it as that. Oh, great! I can get away from some bureaucratic process that I dislike by spinning up an AWS cluster and exposing the world. All of our data to the world is just not an acceptable answer to anybody.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in again. Like with app teams, I want to go to cloud. Why? Because I don't want to do change management. Get out of my office. Next.
More questions?
So you all have very busy schedules. You're meeting with, tens or hundreds of vendors. I'm a salesperson. How, as a salesperson, do I get your attention? What's going to, get you to take that meeting? Is it by luck and chance, or by a particular message, or any advice in that respect?
How do you get that meeting? How do you, what does it take to get that meeting?
Get introduced. Get introduced to somebody that you know who knows somebody in a particular company. I mean, honestly, I think all of us get bombarded with the emails and asking for the meeting, everything else. What gets you in the door is association with companies like this, and find someone who actually has done work with you and the particular company that you're trying to pitch in. That introduction is so important.
I would say just try to know why you're talking to us in enough detail such that you're not just bringing in my solution does X, Y, and Z, and I love my solution. Do you want to buy it? Is like the worst. Just so the emails that are clearly just cut and paste or automatically generated from Salesforce are automatically deleted, and the ones that show that, wow, I researched Blackstone. I know you're using X, Y, or Z. This is a specific way that you can enhance X, Y, or Z with my solution, because here's why it's differentiated, is always going to get more of a view. You still might have to be persistent with that, but I think a tailored approach is the way to do it.
Concise, personalized pitch probably helps, right?
Yes.
More?
How do you deal with now, if you have to make an acquisition or something, how do you deal with importing somebody else's relationship into your, now you've got something, you have this startup that's now part of the universe, whether or not you wanted it.
Question was about how do you integrate, right, relationships, especially when you have an acquisition.
We've done a few of those. It's pure cultural. There's two facets to your question, and I'm not sure which one you're asking, perhaps both. One of which is you make an acquisition, the acquired shows up with their history of STDs, otherwise all the vendors they've done business with, and you've got a bunch of contracts to rationalize. That's lawyers, guns, and money, but you deal with it. And you end up having to play Solomon and split some babies and break some rice bowls. But the other part is far more interesting of, great, 3 years ago, there's some area in API gateway work that we really wanted to do, and we wanted to do it ourselves for the reasons that made sense at the time, and we purchased a company, 50-person startup in Israel that had brilliant stuff. And this is not a new lesson for me. I think it was a new lesson for the firm because it was an early, when you had something that disproportionate. But as we've done more of these, that there's a cultural, anthropological aspect of this, that you just have to expect that the way they think, operate, is radically different. That the immediate frustration with the impedance mismatch and the velocity with, say, decision making is taken. Try and identify that stuff and welcome newcomers. Here's things that are going to drive you batshit the minute you walk in, and here's the ways you start mitigating it. And you can help us become more like you.
And the people and the folks that acquired the company, or depending on if you're in favor of it, are always going to be like, well, be nice. Don't really tell them that. Just try to make them feel good for a while, and then we'll slowly, and that's just the exact wrong thing to do. Just rip the Band-Aid off, be in a really nice way. We're going to rip this Band-Aid off. It's really going to hurt, but it'll heal faster once we get going on the future, instead of making you feel good for some temporary position. And that's why I think a lot of the acquired talent winds up leaving companies. We buy very few companies at Blackstone where we're as a corporate entity, and we've had great success because we're really focused on only the culture not only the culture, but primarily the culture, and the team winds up staying for many, many, many years because they feel that from day one, and it's not treated as like an external thing.
Yes.
I have to ask, honestly, is it easier selling into financial services today? Because I've been lucky enough to start a company about 10 years ago where I got adoption with a large portion of Wall Street, and it was a hardcore technology that we were able to get into companies and get contracts very quickly. In the last couple of years, I again started a company targeting the same vertical, and first of all, VC said, if you're going to that vertical, we actually don't want to start to invest in it. And second, when I went out, I've had two head of global training at two major firms that wanted to buy the technology, and it got blocked in the preferred vendor legal process, where I eventually, at this point, gave up. And here's after I built two financial services companies. So for me to walk away from my bread and butter at this point was really surprising. So is it easier today, or is it harder, given what I experienced?
Question was, is it easier or harder today to sell into financial services?
I think it's easier today. I really believe it's easier today. If it's a right value proposition, I think the companies will do what it takes, including the preferred list and getting the POC and getting the right funding. If this is a really value proposition, and somebody already mentioned, you have to have a very targeted software or service that you are providing for the particular company. If the value is there, I don't think it's going to be more difficult. I think understanding of the startup companies in financial industry came the full circle. I really believe that startups right now picking us than other way around if there is actually the service that we need, and it's just knowing how to approach it with the particular company, how to present that value realization for them. I don't believe it's getting harder. I don't know if you believe.
I think that it may feel harder because I think the houses are more crowded, right? Like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there was very few pieces of technology, so it was just more open space. And now, even in HR used to have, spreadsheets, and now HR buys 10 to 20 different vendors, probably minimum. So I think it's just a nature of how crowded it is, not necessarily the process is less efficient. But value proposition is most important. And if you can find blue ocean for people, that always helps a lot.
The comment that I'd add, I spent a good chunk of my career in the front office contributing to sprawl. And because irony is the organizing principle of the universe, I've spent the past 4 years having to industrialize the process of diaper changing with the sprawl that's been created that way. So the vendors, it's different. The shape and the aperture, you're used to a rectangular door, and now you kind of have to limbo sideways. The vendors who walk in with something that's differentiated, who've taken some time to understand, in the space that I operate in, what are the 10 most likely things that I already have? And how is this either hugely complementary to and it must have, or what is it going to displace?
Let's take one more question.
So I'm very curious, why haven't a lot of financial firms, Blackstone, have embraced technologies to help their asset management almost to grow, like chatbots or some of that? Because I kind of feel if you look at Morgan Stanley, contacted those guys, and they don't open drop-off links, they don't base attachments. So why is it that you guys are so traditional on face of reaching out rich people when it comes to getting your assets under management? Why is that reason that you don't have much desire?
The question was, why haven't you kind of adopted chatbots, those kinds of technologies?
I just think your question, because if you talked about Dropbox as well, and that's a whole other.
Financial banks that actually don't actually take it. They say that's more dangerous than sending Dropbox links or file share, because you can have wireless.
I think that one, we don't have many. We only have accredited investors, qualified purchasers. So our investor universe is much smaller. So the benefits to doing heavy outreach to the masses is not necessarily as big for us as it would be for retail banks. And we have done some technologies like that. I would say that the answer is regulation. and the nervousness and the risks around that. Everything needs to be logged. Everything needs to be monitored. Everything needs to go through compliance checks. Everything needs to be, like, there is tons of things that we care deeply about not messing up. And that certainly makes it a lot slower to get off the ground and to convert old processes to new processes that are as safe as the old ones. So I'd say that's probably why you haven't had as much consumerization of fintech as maybe some other industries have gone a lot faster, because they don't have the regulation that financial services does.
Like when your client is one of the world's largest asset managers, hedge funds, pension funds, you get one chance to get it right. With a consumer, I'm with you. Like I love the agility, I love the intimacy of it. But as a consumer, if you accidentally got someone else's statement, you might be like, "Oops, I'll delete it," or "Oops, I hope they didn't send mine to someone else." What do you think happens to us if, we send Bridgewater's positions to Citadel and vice versa? It's an existential crisis.
It's covered by older people, and if you look at a lot of people who are rich, money will come to BlackRock, Blackstone, will prefer Alexa, they'll prefer chatbots also, all right?
Over time, you're probably right. I just think it's the incremental benefits are relatively small, so it'll just take longer for it to become a must-do.
I think we'll end there. Thank you guys so much. It was great.
Thank you, everybody. Let's give one more round of applause to our esteemed panelists and 2 demos tonight. It is wonderful to be back in action. Save the dates on Wednesday. Well, we're back to our normal Wednesday. So Wednesday, October 30th, Wednesday, November 20th. You'll see more about our lineups for the next 2 NYETMs. Thanks so much for coming, everyone, tonight, and we will see you soon.